And I just want to welcome all of you here to the Copper Queen Library virtual programs and to Becky Orozco's My Life in Ruins, a program I am just so looking forward to. And I just want to make one quick announcement, which is that we wrote a grant to SHPO, the State Historic Preservation Office, to do a full engineering report and assessment of the Copper Queen Library building at 6 Main Street, which is a historic building in a historic district. And it needs some love and tenderness, but we can't do that until we get a historic building structural engineering assessment. SHPO has honored us with this grant. It's a $20,000 grant and requires a $13,000 match from the city. That will be on the agenda tonight at 7 p.m. So hopefully Mayor and Council will also be as excited as we are. This assessment, once it's finished, will give us the tools we need to write grants and to target specific areas of the building for repair and reinforcement. And our goal, our really big goal, is to open up the 3rd floor balcony to the public. That has to be done safely, but that space is really community space and should be enjoyed by the community. And so that is the goal that we're working toward. I'm really pleased to announce that. And with that, I am so pleased to welcome Becky Orozco. Welcome. Yay.
Hi, everyone. It's really good to see so many friends from all over and from so many times in my past. I'm going to bring up and get started on our program. Wait, I did that wrong. Just a second. Forgot to hit share screen. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is how I got to here, to Bisbee, Arizona, after 20-some years of been here in the community. But most of my career was spent as a field archaeologist. And so I thought I would tell a story about how I got here. It starts in Willcox. Bobby is on, I don't think she's in this class with me, but she was graduated from high school with me. I always ask my students if they can tell which one in this picture I am, and very few people can come up with that. I tell, some people, well, that was a bully. No, this is me here in the center. Let's go back one. I'm still learning the technology here. I'm the little girl with no hair in the center. That was the year I had chicken pox and my grandmother shaved my head, and that's it growing out. But I choose this because that's when I decided that I wanted to be an archaeologist. And the reason that happened was this guy, Charlie DePeso. Charlie was the head then of the Amarin Foundation, and a family friend took my family out to tour the museum. At that point, it was by appointment only, and Charlie took us around. And by the time I left that day, I knew that what I wanted to be was an archaeologist. Couldn't spell it yet, but I knew that that was what I wanted to be. And Charlie was my friend and mentor and helped me get there. So I eventually graduated from Willcox High School in a year of big hair. And went on to study. My first archaeology class was at Cochise College, and this was an excavation class that we had out at the Amarin on the grounds of the Amarin. It's a site called the Westfall site, and I'm standing here in the excavation. And Charlie was around for that. His foster son, Carlos Caraveo, was our instructor, and it kind of got me started on that path to archaeology. I got to go to Mexico to visit the site where Charlie had been working in the previous few years. This is Casas Grandes, or Paquimé, in northern Chihuahua. And that was probably the highlight of the Amarants archaeological excavation series that they had done. Well, so eventually I went to U of A and I graduated from the University of Arizona. And just before I graduated, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. I wasn't sure about graduate school or anything like that. But this guy, Mike Mosley, who was an archaeologist from Harvard University working on a National Geographic project in Peru, came to the U of A and gave a presentation. And he talked about his project in South America. And I went up afterwards thinking I could find out about graduate school and those sorts of things. And I said, what do I have to do to get a job on a project like yours? And he said, come to Peru, I'll give you a job. And so I did, and shocked the heck out of me. When I knocked on his door, this was before cell phones, before internet, before the kinds of communication we have now. He never thought I would take him up on it, but I did, and he gave me a job. The site was just outside of Trujillo, Peru, in the north coast of Peru. And you can imagine this kid from Willcox getting on a bus in Nogales, and 2 months later, making it there. It was an adventure, but I made it. And the site was right outside of Trujillo. Trujillo has an incredible history because it's where the conquest of Peru actually started. It's where Pizarro landed when he went inland to conquer the Inca. But it was also a long time capital of the peoples of the North Coast. And the largest pre-Columbian city in the New World is Chan Chan, this huge site right outside of the city of Trujillo. It's out of adobe. It was occupied from about 1100 to 1400 AD, and it was incredibly wealthy. It was sort of accidentally conquered by the Inca, and that bankrolled the Inca in building their empire, and that was the empire in power, of course, when Pizarro arrived soon after. So that's the site from an aerial shot. It's made out of adobe because it's on the north coast and it almost never rains there. It's always very dry. And so this adobe city is incredibly well preserved. And the friezes on the walls are still, they're very beautiful, or they were when I was there. They've had a few losses because of changing climate. A couple of rainstorms have hit in recent years. So the job I got was measuring the water systems. And the water systems were this series of great big walk-in wells. They look kind of like swimming pools. And the walk-in wells, because it almost never rains, it's right on the coast, it's not near a major river, but the water table was only a few feet deep. So they would build these big wells in each of those compounds in the city, and controlling the water was part of what the government did. And so my job was to go around and measure all of these. I lived in a little village down on the coast, just down from the site. Every morning I'd get up and catch a bus out to the site and walk around with my measuring tape all day. This little town is called Huanchaco, and it's right on that north coast. It's been occupied for 400 years now, and it's a fishing village because the Humboldt Current goes right by the coast of Peru, and fishing was the reason for the cultures that built major cities on the coast. So Huanchaco still today is a fishing village. Every day the men go out in these little boats they call caballitos. They're made out of reeds, and they paddle them out into the surf and then fish and then surf them back at the end of the day. And we have ceramics from the site that have drawings of boats just like this from the time when Chan Chan was occupied. And so I had this site. I was living on the beach on this incredible project, National Geographic, Harvard University project, with great seafood and surfing. It does not get a whole lot better than that. And that's how I spent the year of 1974-75. I came back, there I am at Chan Chan. I came back and ended up going to Alaska. Next, where I got a job working at the University of Alaska. I was living with my soon-to-be husband, Ron, at a cabin outside of town. But the thing about Alaska is, it's Fairbanks especially, is it's cold and dark for most of the year, which was not my favorite kind of climate. So I eventually talked us into heading back to South America, where we ended up in Quito, Ecuador. And here's a map of Quito, of Ecuador. And Quito was, well, the reason we went there is we were into hiking and climbing, and Quito was surrounded by major volcanoes. And so Ron was climbing volcanoes, and I heard about an archaeology site. We were living in Quito, just behind the old cathedral. Once again, this is a colonial era city. Cathedral is close to 500 years old. And we lived just down the block. And I heard about an archaeology site that was being excavated by a Peace Corps project. And so I went out to visit the project, and I talked to the guy who was the Peace Corps director there, a guy named Emil Peterson. And we talked for a while, and he heard that I'd worked on a degree in archaeology. Anyway, he says, well, do you need a job? And so I went to work for the Proyecto Arqueológico Cotocojao. And this is on the flanks of the volcano right outside of Quito called Pinchincha. And it dated to about 500 BC when Pinchincha erupted and buried the town, the community, in about 2 meters of ash and preserved it in almost Pompeii style. And so it was incredibly well preserved. There was lots of beautiful ceramics. They found it when they were making a housing development and cutting a road through. They cut through the cemetery of the village. But it would have been a trading village for obsidian, which is a volcanic glass that was the best for making old tools. And so obsidian became my focus, because obsidian's got a chemical fingerprint that if you can find the original volcanic eruption that caused the formation of that obsidian, you can trace it. And it's great for tracing trade routes. So my job that year was climbing volcanoes looking for obsidian. Again, not much better job than you can get than being in Ecuador looking for obsidian. This is Antisana, the volcano where we eventually found the source for the high-grade obsidian that Cotocojao was trading when we were there. Well, we were there a few years and came back to the States, and I got a job working as a ranger at Mesa Verde. Gwen is on here somewhere. Gwen will recognize that because she was a fellow ranger with me that summer at Mesa Verde, where I gave a lot of tours and eventually made it back to this area of southeastern Arizona, where Ron got a job working for Sulphur Springs Valley Electric. We lived in a dome house outside of Willcox near Cochise, and my daughter Sochi grew up her first years in that little house. SSVC, Sulphur Springs Valley, has an international program of rural electrification. And so Ron got a job in Guatemala. So we moved to Guatemala in 1988, living in, the project was based in Guatemala City, and I was working then on my PhD in history. We were living in downtown Guatemala City. This is the view from our apartment. And my project was to look at records in the colonial archives. And Guatemala City was founded in 1524, and they have records that date back to that time period. And so I was looking at health issues in Guatemala in the archives. And so every day I would ride a bus downtown. This is going into the old colonial part of the city. Guatemala in 1988 to 1994, when we lived there, was in the middle of a civil war, an insurrection. And so there was a lot of police presence. One time, one of these guys dropped his gun and shot 7 people, but I managed to avoid having that happen to me as I went to the archives to work. And this was a job that was really, really interesting for about a week and a half. But by the end of looking at old documents all day, every day in colonial era Spanish and trying to muddle my way through, I was kind of beginning to wonder how well I was hanging in there. But I also got to travel around and visit archaeological sites. This is Tikal, the most famous Maya site, and began to do some tour guiding on the side. Because of my archaeological background. There I am with Tikal in the background. Star Wars fans will recognize this scene because it is in the original Star Wars movie. And about a few months into it, met some other archaeologists, and I got a call one day from an archaeologist who was living there, who was originally from Canada, Rick Bronson, and he had said that there had been a report of a shipwreck that had been discovered in Lago Isabal, which, if I go back really quickly here to my map, you can see Lago Isabal is this river that flows from the lake and river system that flows into the Caribbean. And this was a major trading area for people from the Spaniards to modern times. Until they built the railroad and the road to the coast, this was still the major inlet for people coming into Guatemala. Anyway, they said that it was being looted, and the government was looking for a team to go down and map this shipwreck. And did I want to join into this project? And I said, sure, that sounds like a whole lot more fun than doing documents in the archives. There's part of our crew. This is Rick Bronson, the archaeologist on my left, and Billy Aljo, who owned the sailboat that we dove off of while we were looking at this site. And it turned out that the particular wreck that we found was not Spanish, but British from the 1850s, when a steamship got caught in a storm and sank in the lake. Well, once the artifacts started coming out, the British embassy got really interested, and they had us do a display of the artifacts at the embassy. And at the, Guatemala is kind of a small country. Everybody came. The president sent flowers. The energy minister was there, and Shell Oil had applied to do oil testing in this lake right at the same time we were doing this project. And the energy minister came up to us afterwards and said, would you guys be interested in doing the archaeology for Shell Oil? And we sort of looked at each other back and forth a couple of times and said, okay. And that began the Proyecto Arqueológico Izabal, where I worked for the next 6 years that I lived in Guatemala. We did a lot of underwater work. We mapped sites on the into the jungle, 3 kilometers in from the lake on all sides, found 177 Maya sites, 6 shipwrecks, 2 wrecked airplanes. It was an incredible project. This is from one of the Maya sites. It's called an Eccentric Flint, probably part of a ceremonial offering. And this is a cannon that came up off of one of the ships. We had to get the Coast Guard to come and use their crane to bring the cannon up off of the shipwreck on the bottom of the lake. So lots of incredible stuff. That was our crew. Elsa was the Guatemalan archaeologist who was on our project, and there's Rick and Clive, another Canadian archaeologist who worked. Well, that went on for 6 years till 1994. And in 1994, things in Guatemala, the Civil War heated up to a point where it became kind of crazy to live in Guatemala. We had had a couple of nose to machine gun barrel experiences in the lake area. There had been bombings on the street outside of our house in Guatemala City that blew all the pictures off the walls. And then there was a kidnapping off the bus that my daughter rode to school. And so I decided that it was time to say goodbye to Guatemala. And the project had pretty much finished and closed down. Shell Oil had decided not to drill there. So came back to the United States and got a job again as an archaeology tour guide. A company called Far Horizons that's was based in Albuquerque at the time. Now it's in San Rafael. But I got to lead trips to places like Machu Picchu. There I am with a group. Sicily, looking at Roman ruins in Sicily. There's Rome itself. Bolivia. Here in Bolivia, I got to go. There was a shaman who blessed our group before we went visiting some really highland archaeology sites there. This is Xochicalco in Mexico, a major ruin right outside of Mexico City. And Utatlan, Guatemala, visiting a cave site where a number of artifacts had been found, but they had also burned incense in this cave, and that's the soot from the incense that I became covered with crawling around. Chichen Itza in the Yucatan. Well, after I'd worked for Far Horizons for several years, I got a call from a friend, or the woman that I'd worked for at Cochise College. When I lived in Arizona, in the early 80s, before we went to Guatemala, I had taught archaeology and history for Cochise College. And my boss there was a woman, Sammy Pascal, and she headed the Elder Hostel program. And Elder Hostel had been a big part of Cochise College, but then they dropped the program. And Sammy formed a company to continue it. And she called me up one day and asked me if I wanted to be the director. And so that's what brought me back to Bisbee, where I went to work for Geronimo Educational Travel Foundation and led trips many places, mostly in Latin America, but it also gave me the opportunity to travel all kinds of other places. And during that time period, I went to Egypt and the areas around Egypt. I'd been there for about 6 years when I got a call from Cochise College, because at Cochise, I had written a proposal for a program to do cross-border studies. And in 2004, Karen Nicodemus, who was the president of the college at the time, invited me to lunch and asked me if I was interested in giving that a try. So that brought me to Cochise College in 2004. And to celebrate, I went to Egypt. While I was there, I also visited Jordan and the border with Israel. This is Hadrian's Gate, a Roman site on the border with Jordan and Syria that today has been destroyed by the conflict that is going on in that area. But I got to go there when it was still there. And then one of the sites, of course, in Jordan that everybody goes to is Petra. If you are, once again, a movie fan and you watched Indiana Jones and the Lost Crusade, you'll recognize this entrance into the stone city, the rock-cut city of Petra in Jordan that dates to about 900 AD. It was an incredible place to visit. After that, the next year, Cambodia attracted me. Angkor Wat had always seemed like an incredible place, and so spent that trip at Angkor Wat, and then on into Thailand, where we got to do a little bit of elephant riding. That's my young steed. A couple of years later, 2011, 10, 11, I ended up in Tunisia. Tunisia is, of course, right near Sicily. Today, it's an area where a lot of the refugee population heading for Europe goes to Tunisia because it's right off the coast of Sicily, which is right off of Italy. And it was a Roman site, played a big part in the history of Rome. While I was there, unfortunately, it was the time when Arab Spring started. So I ended up having to leave Tunisia in a hurry. My daughter swears that when I go to these places that wars broke out, but it's only happened 4 times. I just don't think that's that big a record. The next year I went to Southern Africa, to Tanzania, and visited the Maasai people there. And then in Rwanda, hiked up to see the mountain gorillas. This is probably one of the more incredible trips of my time traveling around, to see the gorillas up that close and just feel their presence. It was an incredible feeling. Then the next year, I didn't have any trips planned, but I had a friend who was who was Greek, and he was in Greek in 2012 when the economic collapse was at its height. And so he knew I was interested in archaeology, and he says, well, my wife and I are moving to Poland. And so our apartment's going to be empty until we get ready to sell it. Would you like it? So I got the apartment for the summer and went over there and stayed in the apartment and traveled all around Greece, visiting all kinds of ruins. This is the Acropolis in Athens. I started my collection of me standing in Roman amphitheaters or Greek amphitheaters. This is at Delphi. Then that winter, got a chance to go to England. Stonehenge ruins in December is not the best time to visit. It was very cold and wet, as you can probably tell, but it's an incredible site. It's an amazing site. And it was at a time when you could still get a little closer than you can get today. They've cut off a lot of the site. The next year, I applied for and received a Fulbright fellowship to China. It was specifically related to community colleges, and community colleges, because of their job trainings, China has a population of 300 million students who are ready to go to college, but they don't have enough capacity. And so they were looking at the community college model as a possibility. And so they chose a group of community college educators to go and talk to them about colleges. And that's what I got to do, but I got to visit some really cool places. In the meantime, there I am sitting on the Great Wall. Then that winter, got back, decided I needed more travel, so ended up in India, Taj Mahal behind me there. Northern India in the wintertime is also kind of cold and wet, but it was exciting places to visit. And then the next summer, more ruins, I headed to Turkey. I had always been very interested in the Hittite culture, the culture that basically started metalworking on a large scale. The Iron Age basically starts with the Hittite culture in Turkey. And so I traveled around to Hittite sites. This is right on the border with Iran. You can see just in the background, you can practically see the fence there. This site also is one that is not open for visitation anymore because of the ongoing conflict in that area. But this is Mount Nimrut, where we visited an ancient ritual site, one of the many sites that we got to visit around Turkey. Well, the next summer, another community college trip. Cuba was open. This was in 2014. Cuba had opened up and they wanted to look at the community college model. So once again, a group of community college professors was invited to Cuba on this educational program. And put together by these two guys who taught, I think Robert teaches in North Carolina, and there's Sheila Heidman with me, was at Cochise College at the time. So we traveled around, got to ride in the fun cars, found my own train in Havana, visited sites all over Cuba, and it was a very incredible trip in which people were so open and willing to talk to us and friendly. I would walk around, I had a little bit of Spanish, talk to people, they would invite me into their homes. It was a really wonderful opportunity. And to be able to go before, once again, it became closed to the kind of tourism that we were doing. So next fun trip was to Morocco, and you can tell from my camel riding experience that the camel wasn't too happy with me as his driver, but got to visit once again. Morocco was a Roman stronghold. It has a number of Roman sites. This is up on top of a hill fort site above a river that was a major trading route into Morocco from the Spanish part of the Roman Empire at about the beginning of 100 AD or so. There I am at Morocco, of course, is only 19 miles across from Spain, and there's a number of old Roman forts all along the coast there. This is the one outside of Casablanca. The next summer, once again, didn't have any real big plans, so I rented an apartment in Rome and ended up doing Roman archaeology once again. There's the Colosseum behind me. Traveled all over, got to see a whole bunch of really cool archaeology. Got some more pictures of me standing in amphitheaters and visiting the Roman archaeology. The Museum of Archaeology in Rome is astonishing. And my apartment was only about 4 blocks from here, so I could go on a regular basis. It was really fun to go. This is the statue of Constantine, the last major Roman emperor who basically conquered all that area and had a monolithic statue of himself built there. Then the next year, I ended up in Spain. And while I was at Cochise College early on, there was a program which brought students from former Soviet republics to study at Cochise for the year. And I had been in charge of that group of students. And Aida, who is with me here, was a student from Azerbaijan who spent a year at Cochise. She now lives in Madrid, where she has a bakery. And there she, when we got to Madrid, she acted as our guide, took us around to places all over Madrid before I joined the tour that would take me to Portugal and to the Spanish sites that had to do with the conquest. And so from there we ended up in Lisbon. This is a guy named Henry the Navigator, or Prince Henry, who basically set off the era of exploration to the New World. And in Lisbon, I also got to visit this bookstore, which seemed like kind of an out-of-the-way place, where a young woman who had worked in this bookstore as an expatriate from England started writing a book. And that book became Harry Potter. This was J.K. Rowling worked in this bookstore. It was an incredible bookstore. It was kind of fun to walk around in that store. This is in Seville, where Columbus has his final resting place. This is his tomb. And of course, Columbus and the whole era of exploration tied into the time I was in Guatemala, because the sites that we were looking at, some of what we were finding were from that time period of the exploration. Columbus sailed along the coast of Guatemala in 1502. So going there was an exciting place to visit. It's also the place where all of the records from the exploration of the New World are stored. The Archivo General de Indias. And so I escaped from the tour group, went to the archives, spent a day there, just kind of walking, because you can't really get into the precious documents, which are all now digitized and online. But in this archives, there are 7 kilometers of shelves of documents from this time period. Which I think that's a little more than Allison has at the Bisbee Library, but you know, it's kind of a comparison. Came back, and I've been continued to visit Casas Grandes in Chihuahua. I've led a number of trips there, both for Cochise College and later for the Patagonia Museum. This is from a couple of winters ago. In 2016, I got another Fulbright fellowship to go to Kazakhstan. And in Kazakhstan, we were housed at the Nazarbayev University, which is in a town that's now called Nur Sultana, after the longtime leader of the country, that he built this city out in the northern steppes as a way to sort of claim Kazakhstan after it left Soviet influence. And so we were here at Nazarbayev. It's a university that's taught in English, because Kazakhstan sees English as the future of technology. And in the middle of this city that has been built by the oil money that Kazakhstan has generated. This is a tower to the Nazarbayev, to the leader. He's now retired, but still is pretty much running things in the country. There's the Opera House. My project there, the original project that I was going to work on, had to do with the domestication of the horse. The horse was first domesticated on the northern plain steppes of Kazakhstan about 5000 BC. And it's also where the Silk Road went from China to the west. And so that was my plan. But once we got there, it became about the only horses that I saw were on menus. The horse culture is sort of off to the side. And so I switched to one that looked at the effects of culture and language. This is in the mountains outside of the old capital, Almaty. And culture, Kazakhstan is a unique situation because it was the Kazakh empire, the part of that Silk Road empire was taken by the Soviets in the early 1900s. And they enforced the speaking of Russian. For generations, only Russian was taught in the school, so many young Kazakh people who's had Russian as their major language. Well, then with the fall of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s, Kazakhstan decided to make Kazakh once again its primary language. And to get a job in Kazakhstan, you have to speak Kazakh. And all of the people who were in their 30s, 40s, 50s were having the same struggle I had trying to learn Russian to go to Kazakhstan. So I looked at how language affects culture, and that became my project. On the way back, since my tour had been paid for by your tax dollars, and the flight stopped off in Paris, I got off the flight and stayed for 2 weeks because I really wanted, I was teaching US history at the time, wanted to visit some of the World War I and World War II sites. This is Normandy Beach, Omaha Beach, standing right above the cliffs where the D-Day entrance into France in 1945 took place. I also went to visit World War I sites. I had a relative from Cochise County, a guy named August Jungi, who was killed in France in 1918. And I found the cemetery and his grave where he was buried. So I spent a couple of weeks hanging out in Paris. In 2019, my summer trip was to the Baltic Sea, where I visited a number of the Baltic countries. I decided the Viking look wasn't quite for me, but I had a really good time visiting all of those Baltic states. This was in Latvia, and Latvia was part of, again, of that time period when the Soviet Union was coming apart. And in 1991, this guy, Gustav Ernesaks, led what was called the Singing Revolution, where they began a nonviolent protest against Soviet rule, in which all the people through the 4 states, those 4 Baltic states, stood up one day in August of 1991 and held hands over 600 miles and convinced the Soviets that they were serious and got their freedom. And that was one of the most moving parts of this journey. In Sweden, I went to visit the house of Rene Descartes, one of my favorite philosophers. This is where he ended up. I don't think this is where he said, "I think, therefore I am," but anyway, that was his home. And of course, in Denmark, got to see the Little Mermaid. This picture does not show the 6,000 other people who were trying to see her that same day. And came back from that trip the fall of 2019. In the spring, January of last year, of 2020, I ended up in New York at a conference where I talked about Bisbee, actually, Bisbee 17, the movie, but got to do some traveling around, visiting history museums, and of course, the Statue of Liberty. But that was the end of travel, pretty much, because soon after that was when travel ended. I had a bunch of trips because I had planned on retiring this year from Cochise College, which I accomplished in August, and had planned on almost immediately leaving on a trip for Greenland and Iceland. But that got canceled along with the trip to Australia and New Zealand. Not going to go there this year, but I have plans for the future. I've booked a trip that's still on for January to Vietnam. There's Vietnam and Cambodia. I wanted to go back to Angkor Wat and visit some of the historic sites in Vietnam. So that's on for January. Greenland, Iceland is is on the books for August. We'll see. Australia is planned for September, October. And then following January, I've had booked a trip for Antarctica for this year. That one got canceled. It's been moved to 2022. And then also later in 2022, going to the Dalmatian coast. This is in Montenegro, where I'll be one of the countries along the Dalmatian coast of the Aegean Sea that I plan to visit next year. So I've got trips in the offing. I'm just hoping they come off. In the meantime, my historic preservation project here that has to do with 23 crumbling adobe buildings is Camp Naco in Naco, where we're trying to save this incredible site that dates to the time of the Mexican Revolution. It was built to protect the border during that time, and this was completed in 1919. It's occupied until 1924. It's the only one of these border protection forts that is still standing. And it is owned now by the city of Bisbee, and we are working on a restoration project. A couple weeks ago, we went in and cleared out this vegetation. Emily was responsible for getting this vegetation cleared. And this Saturday, a group of the South Sierra Vista Buffalo Soldiers motorcycle group is coming down to help us do some more work in preparation for hopefully doing some adobe preservation coming up. There's the exterior of the site. It's an incredible place if you haven't been. Allison and the library, I did a trip for them last year, and I would be willing to do one again in the future if you are interested. And that's the end of my pictures. I'm ready to answer questions.
Wow, that was a whirlwind global experience. And so I would ask, people to unmute and ask your questions for Becky, if anybody wants to start. Christine?
Oh, I just wanted to say, Becky, that was amazing.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Wow. I do hope this is working. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Great, because it's just echoing in here in my ears. So Becky, you said that you're working on this Saturday, and yes, that was amazing. I wish I had that experience. Thank you very much for sharing, and your pictures were beautiful. I'm interested in working with you on this Saturday. What do I need to do?
Come to Camp Naco. We are going to start at about 8:30.
I don't know Camp Naco.
Okay, well, do you know how to get to Naco, Arizona?
Just go down Naco Road?
Yeah, go on down Naco Highway, and
Okay.
you get to, before you get to the border itself, you'll see Newell Road. Newell is right where the old golf course was.
Okay.
And the Newell family owned all of that property. They actually owned the property that Newell was on. When Christine was growing up and living there, it was called Camp Newell, and Newell's Camp. Anyway, Newell Road, if you'll turn west on Newell Road, and you just follow it to the end, and you come to the camp.
And what time does that start, Becky?
8:30.
Okay, if you want to email me the info, I'll make a post and I'll send it out in either the newsletter and an email.
Okay.
And promote that. It really is exciting that the city of Bisbee agreed to take ownership of that property to preserve it and to support the historical importance of that site and with your leadership.
And what do I need to bring besides myself?
Yeah, probably gloves. It's hot. There's a lot. What we'll be doing mostly is clearing vegetation. There'll be some painting. We're going to replace some window coverings. Mostly we need to, so there will be all kinds of stuff there, but come prepared to work outside.
And Becky, you can send me all that information too, and I'll email it to you and email it to other people.
Great.
Becky, it's a nice job. This is George Van Otten, and enjoyed the presentation. I'm sorry I can't get down there and help you right now, but the medicine I'm taking won't let me get that hot. But when it cools down a little, maybe I can be of some use.
Okay, we're working now with Zach Palma, who is who works at Coronado National Memorial, and he does Adobe workshops for them. He's in the process of figuring out how we can do some Adobe patching. So we're going to have a number of work days coming up in the near future. For people who can't do it right now, when it cools off, we'll be doing Adobe work days, hopefully through the fall.
That sounds fantastic. I'll promote those too, Becky, and maybe put arrange for the library to, get some people down there. And Zach did an Adobe workshop for the kids at the annex, and it was so much fun. It's
yeah, and that's where I heard about it, was from my daughter who took Ada, my granddaughter, and she had told me about it. She couldn't remember his name, and I called up and I said, I want to talk to the Adobe guy.
Yeah.
And they put me through and we're working on it.
If
So
you like mud, that part's fun, but then you're actually learning how to make sustainable building, making Adobe bricks, and they're actually in the process of building their own home using these kinds of
Yeah.
sustainable technologies to do that. I had a question for you, Becky. Where is it? Well, I thought,
I put it on mute.
first of all, thinking back to the biography project that I was talking about, writing little autobiographies, I mean, you would have to have like a 20-volume set, you know, just one for each period. And the 7 kilometers of hallways, you know, we could take a kilometer for you. I feel so lucky that since I started at the library in 2016 that we've been able to do some of these programs, the Baltic Sea, Rome, Normandy. I just really, for you to bring your experiences of these travels back as a historian and an archaeologist. And so they're much more, you know, the vision, not just a travel log, but looking at history. And I love how you, you know, started in South America and then almost retraced that path backwards to, you know, Europe and that exploration age. I was wondering if you could answer a couple things. One, the lake in Guatemala City, how deep was that? Were you just snorkeling and diving down?
it was not that deep. Its deepest part, it was about 60 feet. There were a few deeper spots, but most of the wrecks we were diving on, most of where we were diving was about 20 to 40 feet, which doesn't sound deep. We had a crew come down from Texas A&M, who is probably the biggest school in underwater archaeology in the United States today, or the biggest program. They came down and brought what's called a proton magnetometer. And that's basically a great big metal detector that they would pull through the water and it would pick up the shipwrecks. And then we would go and dive on the wrecks and map the wrecks. And so mostly we were working to 20 to 40 feet, but the visibility was very bad. And it was it's incredibly hard work. At one point I had dove every day for like a week. I ended up in 85-degree water getting hypothermia because I'd just been in cold water too long, diving on this project. But that's how we got them mapped. We had heard some other areas. This is a side story. I was involved doing projects for the embassy as well, and I was at a cocktail party at the ambassador's house one night, and I was telling this story, and I told this story about our project and how I was having a hard time getting the diving done. And the next day I get this call from the military attaché who said that he had a group of Navy SEALs who were in the country training right then, and they would be willing to dive for me. Well, I thought that was really exciting, but ended up, this was in a time of uncertainty, and it was also a time when the US invaded Panama, and they got pulled out to Panama. Well, then I heard later that they had thought they could use my project as a way to get into, to find out where the drug routes were in that area. It was a really good thing. They didn't, or we would have probably gotten, well, not have been, had as friendly relations in that area afterwards. But yeah.
Really fascinating. I spent the summer, I think of '94, learning Spanish in Guayaquil, and we did go to Quito. And we were 8 Americans, but we each were living with a host family and doing immersive Spanish, and we all had different experiences. I had a great host family, but we flew up to Quito for the weekend. They told us to be careful drinking. We all promptly went out to eat and ordered margaritas and practically fell off the chair after, you know, and we were all New Yorkers, you know, we know how to drink, but I mean, half a cocktail and you were just dizzy with it because of the altitude.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I didn't touch another drop of alcohol at all though, while I was there.
Yeah, it's almost 10,000 feet in altitude. So
Yeah, and we went up to the volcanoes and we went to one of the villages, one of the fairs where all the craft vendors are. And
Yeah.
so when you say you were looking at the pieces of obsidian to trace back to which volcano erupted, and then that's how you found the volcano?
Well, no, the volcanoes all had a long history of eruptions. And obsidian is a certain kind of eruption in which it's a very hot eruption that sends the molten lava into the air at such velocity that it cools without having time to crystallize. And then it all falls down. And the native peoples would find the best obsidian would be just pure stone with would break to a thickness on its edge that they used for eye surgery tools until just recently. It's that sharp. It'll break to 1 molecule in thickness. And so they would go and gather it and then bring it in and trade from there, trade tools. So you find the eruption to get the original source of the obsidian, and then you can trace you look at the tools and check this obsidian, this chemical fingerprint, you can tell what eruption that particular obsidian came from. And so you can map trade routes.
Oh, wow. That's fascinating.
Oh.
Any other questions?
No, it was great though. I loved it.
I just want to say we're already exhausted just hearing about it.
I just want to go travel. So amazing. Becky, I was wondering, could you just real quick describe that library that was just newly built in one of the Baltic Sea countries that you visited?
Oh, okay, yes, yeah. I'll have to think for just a second to get myself oriented. This was a library in Helsinki, in Finland. And it's a library that they've built there as the center of the community. It's a library, it has books, it has computers, but it also has showers, it has a clothing redistribution center. It has become the center for the community, for everyone who comes into, or who has any kind of needs, but also as a gathering place. And it was a fascinating place to visit.
Thank you. Yeah, Becky brought me the brochure from this library, and it was so inspiring to see the progression, the natural evolution of libraries and communities as resource centers, and really responding to what communities need. And then this city built a brand new design specifically to meet all of these community needs. And I just thought it was wonderful and amazing. Becky, I'm going to read you a couple comments. Nancy said, Sheila, when there was one photo. From Heather, Miss Becky, I adored the presentation, but I must go for now. I will catch the end of it on the recording. From Wendy, thank you for sharing awesome experiences. And from Juanetta, thoroughly enjoyed Becky's presentation. See you Saturday. So just to let you know, those comments are there on the side.
Okay.
And if anybody has a last question.
Hi.
Bobby, I saw that you came on. Did you have a question or just wanted to say hi?
No, I just wanted to, and I'll call you later.
Okay.
I'll call you tomorrow. You gonna be home?
Yep.
I just
Okay,
like
because
to
I'm at Rex, so
comment.
I'm still jet lagged.
Any
No,
other?
but I loved it,
Yes.
you know, getting here in the past that I missed all those years.
Becky, hi. It's so good to
Hi.
see you. And it's wonderful to see all those pictures because I remember all your stories from years past about going to all those wonderful places. And so it was good to put pictures with it. I was really struck with the the role of serendipity in your life, you know, where things would appear and then you would take advantage of them. But it's really quite remarkable. And I wish I could have gone with you on about half of those trips.
But we had some fun ones that
Yeah.
summer at Mesa Verde.
That'd be good. So my final question is a really big one, but with all of that, looking at the archaeology and history and all parts of the world, do you have anything that has struck you about, in general, about human endeavor? I mean, is there that, I know that's a really big one, but you've done a lot of like looking at a whole variety of different cultures and different situations. And if there's anything that you have sort of come away from some of that.
Wow. Well, I worked, of course, at sites. I worked at Maya sites. I worked at the Shimu sites. I did a lot of work in the Roman area, study in the Roman area and the Great Wall of China. And these were all major cultures that you thought at their height, they had it figured out. And then they fell. And one of the things that I think as I think about it, as I look back at these sites, and this was something I was thinking about at Mesa Verde the other day. You know, Mesa Verde was also a culture that had a fluorescence and then was abandoned and the people moved away. And as I looked at, you know, the drought and the fires in California, and although we didn't see fire damage particularly there, you think about that kind of happening that would cause people to just not be able to live there anymore. And we're not paying much attention to that. So, but that, you know, in all the places that I've been, there have been those. Guatemala, working in Guatemala, one of the things that showed up there that we kind of thought about as we were there was that area got hit by a major hurricane in the middle of when we were there. And the thought that that could have been the cause of the abandonment of major Maya cities made perfect sense. And those are all affecting us today.
Thank you very much.
And we're not paying attention.
Thank you, Becky, and I'll see you Saturday.
Okay, good to see you. Thanks Emily.
Thanks for coming. Thank you, Becky, so much. I think that one of the most, kind of off of what she had said, one of the most impressive things is that really what you did was you said yes. You said yes to so many big and unknowable, you know, new and possibly scary, intrepid adventures. And you just went into the unknown. I mean, that to me is so inspiring and so amazing to have that vision right from the get-go to go exploring. You are an explorer.
What?
Barbara, were you saying something?
No, I was yelling at the dog.
Oh, okay. And so I just really appreciate that side of it. And then, as always, bringing the stories back. And I really think about our kids right now that, you know, maybe some of our kids travel more than others, but really we can't travel right now. We are barred from a lot of countries.
Well,
actually.
Yeah, and I'll throw in a story because sometimes those adventures, having Sochi as a young child in Guatemala in the middle of a revolution, got kind of dicey. I took her in the back of a pickup truck across the Andes in Bolivia one year, and as a result of that trip, she got typhoid.
Oh my God.
So there are a couple, she would probably, you know, she had an adventurous childhood that had some cautionary tales. But she also has come so far. I mean, she's such an amazing person now. So
she is, truly. Um, well, thank you so much for being here, all of you. And live your own adventures and write your previous adventures down, and give me a call or an email if you have any thoughts on how we can compile our local stories into a collection for the community. And I've thought about, I really wanted to do this program before the pandemic called, it's Check Out a Person, Check Out a Human, the Human Library Project. And where you check out a person and you hear their stories. And while we can't do that necessarily right now, this program is a really good example of what that experience will be, meeting somebody new and learning about what they've done in their life, and learning about people that you might not normally meet in the course of your day. So those are some things I'm thinking about. So
Thank you all.
thank you, Becky. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Christine.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi, Christine.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.